looking back at the events that took place in your life where you either chose to change or God forced you to change, it always worked out, and it always ended up way better than what we ever thought it was going to be.
Sometimes the biggest resistance to change is our own ego or self-perception on it, instead of trusting that this is probably for the good and happening for a reason.
So for the people watching this video or listening to it in their vehicle or whatever, go ahead and just give us some background on Mike, right? What was your agriculture history like? What was your childhood like? What brought you up to this point where you're at in your career?
Yeah, awesome. So, grew up in New Hampshire, and growing up, one set of grandparents lived in the same town that I grew up in. They had what I would consider to be now a hobby farm. Although, as a little kid, I looked at it like, my grandparents have a farm. This is great. I was able to spend, weekends with them, and the thing that stuck with me as I reflect back on it is they farmed from it was more of a lifestyle for them more than, hey, this is something that we're consciously doing as a hobby, right? So
Yep.
they had everything from chickens, seasonal turkeys, couple seasonal pigs, horses, and then had a couple of acres of vegetables that they did. Anything that wasn't just kind of consumed by the family, they had a little roadside table cooler out
Yeah.
in front of the road that they sold stuff on. And I remember a story of my grandfather realizing that people would pay money for beet greens, which he looked at as, oh, I feed those to chickens, and then, oh, I
Yeah.
put those out on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Kidding me? People are going to pay for them. So I really enjoyed the time that I get to spend there as a kid.
Mhm.
Definitely impacted kind of my outlook on why you get up in the morning, what you take care of first in the morning, all those sort of things. And it was also certainly planted the seed for my desire to work outside and work with the dirt and everything. So when I was 12, turning 13, I wanted to make some money. My dad, for my whole life growing up, managed a sod farm and nursery operation in New Hampshire. So I solicited him hard to hire me. We didn't have any ownership, so we had to follow labor laws in terms of me being able to work. New Hampshire allowed casual farm labor at the age of 13. So begged him for a job. He gave me a deal where I could repair pallets for $5 an hour, 2 days a week. I felt like
There
I
you go.
struck gold, and he's going, yeah, this kid's gonna learn
This
a
is
thing or
awesome.
two.
Yeah, this is
Right.
great.
I think I made it 2 or 3 days in, and the production manager was like, "So this is a person who is going to show up every day, can't even legally run equipment, so just can do farm labor. Like, can he come work on the production team?" So I worked for them seasonally, two days a week the first year, 3 days a week the following year, and then by the time I was 15, I was working, as many hours as I possibly could, and enjoyed working there seasonally up through graduating from college.
Got it.
Um, my dad made it clear to me as I was getting towards the tail end of college that I need to figure out a career plan that didn't involve the farm, because he didn't see, I think he kind of felt stuck in some points in his career,
Mhm.
and didn't want me to fall into the same trap, but could clearly see that my heart was there. So, he put it as, when you graduate, you're fired, so make plans accordingly.
Yep.
I think that was a big favor. As I was getting towards the end of college, I really enjoyed all the business classes I had taken and everything, but was having a hard time leaving the ag side behind. So my
Mhm.
dad said, "You should check out this place called Production Credit, which is part of Farm Credit."
Yep.
Ended up getting an offer prior to graduation to go work for them out of the in what they call the career development program. So went to one of their Connecticut offices for about 8 weeks, and then a permanent position opened up in New Hampshire.
Got it.
Spent
So let's jump back here right quick because I want to talk about your dad being stuck specifically, right? You said you witnessed
Yeah.
times where he felt like he was stuck and things like that. What describe those times there, and what areas of the operation do you feel like he was stuck, or just life? And in what areas of life do you feel like he was stuck?
Yeah, so this operation had a production farm in New Hampshire and a wholesale nursery. And then they had two other wholesale nursery locations in Massachusetts.
Mhm.
And he definitely, as I would say in middle school, had some opportunities to relocate the family for some career opportunities within that operation. I think he made a tough decision that he wanted to stay where we were and where all of our family was.
Mhm.
So didn't take advantage of that opportunity. I think the other piece of it is he's definitely very much as somebody that owns the work that he does. So in terms of how he operated the farm, operated it very much as an owner would in terms of everything that he did was focused on the farm, the well-being of the farm, all of that
Yep.
sort of thing. So I can remember as a kid, waking up in the middle of the night because the alarm went off and he's, driving 30 minutes to find out, somebody crashed their car and broke into the office and dealing with the police, or there's a bunch of rain coming and we got to pull irrigation pumps out of the river before they're all floating down the river, those sort of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
In the mid 90s, going through the building bust, I know that was, I didn't see it as much as a kid, but I know that there was a lot of stress then in terms of what it meant for the business. Shared a story with me when I was in high school working for the farm about that the bank at that point would no longer meet with just the owners. They wanted him to be at those meetings as well because they understood how key he was to the operation.
Yep.
And at one point, they had some challenges from an operating standpoint, and he threw the keys across the desk at him and goes, "You guys want to operate it? Here you go." And they said, "No, thank you. Let's let cooler heads prevail and figure out a plan here." So
Yeah.
I think he enjoyed the work that he did, enjoyed the farm, but I also know he looked at it and said, in hindsight, was there something else I could have done with my career
Yeah.
and talents?
Okay, so literally that was my next question to ask is what do you think would have happened to him and his life had he taken the opportunity, right, that he passed up on to be close to his family and things like that? Because I think as men we're torn, and I'm not just speaking for men, but anybody leading the family operation, they're man or woman, we're torn between sacrificing our potential future for our family and our kids and where we're at, but also too, it's a two-edged sword because later in life you look back and you're like, man, what would have happened if I would have taken advantage of that? Because obviously God put it in front of him for a reason. I wholeheartedly believe that. I think it's happens to everybody, but a lot of people they stay stuck on the fence versus taking the jump because they feel like they're supposed to sacrifice for kids or they're supposed to sit back and stuff like that. So just kind of curious, like what did you learn from that experience? But also too, do you think he regrets that choice as well?
I don't think he regrets that choice at all,
Okay.
but I think there were times in the back end of his career where he regretted that choice,
Mhm.
especially as he saw some things go on with the upper management of that business that ultimately led to their demise.
Yeah.
So I think that honestly, it was probably put as a, hey, here's something that you could do for your ego and would feel good about it. And I appreciate that he had the wisdom to go, well, how does this balance with what's right for my family?
Yep.
And he says we had so many good things going. Why did I want to upset that, for a potential growth opportunity for my career that I knew in my heart wouldn't be right for the family.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know, if he has regret over deciding to spend his career there. I've never asked him the question if he could redo things like 10 years into working there, if he would have,
Yeah.
if he ever would have left the operation and tried out on
And
his own.
the big reason I asked that too is because with my dad and our family operation, my dad started sorting pens when he was 5, so he was horseback when he was 5, riding around the entire feed yard at that time, which was much smaller than what he built it into. But walking away at 45 with absolutely nothing, built his entire life and career there, and they had a nest egg that was all taken from him, and found bankruptcy, get kicked out of a house and stuff like that. His biggest regret is he never left Tribune, Kansas. So graduated high school at 17. Him and my mom got married right away. Got pregnant with my brother 3 months later, and he looks back and he's like, man, what could have been if I would have just left for a few years there and went to experience life somewhere else versus staying here and building the operation. But I say that because it's very similar to your experience there with your grandpa saying, hey, no, Mike, you're going to go, you don't have a job here after high school, so, or after college, so you better go figure it out for a few years and then we can have a discussion.
Yeah. And they ended up that business ended up closing 5 years after I graduated from
Mm-hmm.
college. So I think he saw the writing on the wall at that point and
Yep.
went, you're not doing this to yourself, Mike. Which
And
I I'm so thankful for.
so thankful for the courage of that man to recognize the writing on the wall and tell the future generation, hey, this is not, you're not allowed to come here. He wasn't disclosing any of the details or things were bad or anything, but he knew the writing on the wall and forced you to go look somewhere else. And I applaud that because that is very rare to happen in the industry today. You know what I mean? And so that's where I have these conflicted feelings around people that are always pushing the kids to come back when they don't know where they're at financially. right? And like, what are the kids really inheriting? Because if it's just debt, there's no legacy there, there's no future there, and things like that. So, anyways, I just wanted to give that man props for that one and pat him on the back because that's a tough thing to do, but it's also the right thing to do.
I got blessed with a good one. He gave
Yeah.
me a lot of sound advice when I chose to listen to it, you know?
There you go. There you go. All right. So then after jumping into production credit or farm credit there, you spent how many years there?
So I spent a total of 17 years
Wow.
with Farm
Okay.
Credit. When I started, there were four associations serving the Northeast. So I went through four mergers. All I was part of the larger organization that eventually built Farm Credit East. The first 12 years of my career were in New Hampshire in the communities that I grew up in as a loan officer, relationship manager. And then in 2020, we moved the family to Connecticut to be a branch manager for it's also where a lot of the admin and
Yep.
executive staff is. Spent 3 years in that role. They decided to get rid of branch managers and instead go with more of a regional approach. And as part of that, I took on a role overseeing a regional team of tax preparers and accountants, and did that role for about 2 years. So
Okay.
got got a lot of opportunity to work directly with customers, and then a lot of opportunity to explore the leadership side of things as well.
Yeah. So what were some of the things you really liked about working there for 17 years? Because obviously you stuck around for a long time. So what were some of the things that you really liked about it?
I did. I liked the people that we were serving. I liked the mission of what we're there for, right? To be there for agriculture. And to be quite honest, I liked the challenges that came from it. I was given opportunities to get involved in some of the technology projects that they had. So I spent a couple of years still being a loan officer, but also in a role that they called the regional technology rep. So basically working with the folks on the technology teams that were building some of our technology stuff, along with trying to be the interface for the customer facing staff.
Yeah.
So those are some great opportunities. But what I really enjoyed was when I get to go out, meet with customers, sit down at the kitchen table, and get to know who they were as people and kind of what makes them tick. And that to me was the fun part of the job.
Mhm.
Crunching the numbers and analyzing loan trends. It's the nature of the beast, but wasn't the part that got me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right. So now the tougher question. What did you not like about 17 years of farm credit? What were the things
Yeah,
that really struck you wrong during that career and that time frame?
Yeah, so one of the things that I really struggled with, and especially as I became a leader within the organization, is it manages things like a commodity in some ways. So what I observed was, we want to do the right thing for the people, we want to do the right thing for the customers, but at the end of the day, the cooperative results are
Yep.
what is going to drive the ship.
Yep.
And I really struggled with that piece of things because what I saw the outcome was there were a lot of really talented people that would hire, and one of two things would happen: would either turn them into a full-fledged workaholic, or they'd get burnt out, and then you'd have somebody who was a high performer with high potential that you just see them kind of treading water in a
Yeah.
position rather than really thriving. So that piece I really struggled with, and the negative impact it had both on the staff but also on the customer experience. And I'm a big believer
Yeah.
that the customer experience matters.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people are involved in ag for a lot of different reasons. Like, so for example, Lance, as our director of coaching for anybody listening to this video and everything, Lance is like full on farm boy. You know what I mean? Like he dies for agriculture, 4-H, all that type of stuff there. Whereas with me, I'm not saying that that stuff is not important. Obviously, it is. It's the foundation of everything we do. But that's not what gets me up out of bed in the morning and drives me. To me, it's very similar to your story, where when I got into the bank, the things I struggled with internally was that these were people like my parents that I was working with. Right.
Yep.
Good, genuine people that wanted to do right by everybody around them, work hard, get rewarded for that hard work, and just build something they can pass on to the next generation. I don't care how they're doing it, whether they're farming, running a trucking company. I don't care. Right. But what I'm going to fight for are the people sitting across the table from me. And I honestly felt like I was handcuffed and not able to do that at the full capacity that I could have at the bank there. as well.
I found a similar experience. I think, the whole lender liability piece, right?
Yes.
Banks being afraid they're going to get sued for giving advice, I think is a real risk, but I think also it's sometimes used as a bit of an excuse
Mhm.
for not, handling things the right way. So as I've come to Legacy Farmer, I've really felt like I've gone from working for the bank and being an interface for customers to I get to actually work for the customers and talk about what's in their best interest, what's the
Yep.
best decision for them, not what's the best decision for the bank and for them.
Yeah. And that was what ultimately caused me to leave my position, in the bank as well when I took the jump and had no plan and two babies and no money or anything like that. I look back and it's like, man, you had some guts there, kid, or you didn't know what pool you were jumping into. But also too, on top of that, the two bosses that I had in the two different banks that I worked at, they were both a-holes. Nobody wanted to work for them and stuff like that. So looking back at that experience, I'm really grateful that they were both terrible people that I did not want to be anything like, because if I didn't have them there and they were really nice, man, Mike, I'd probably still be in the bank right now, you know?
And to be honest with you, Jace, that's probably what kept me there
Mhm.
is I had some great mentors, but I also know that I try to see the good in people and overlook their flaws. So that probably kept me there longer than I
Yeah.
probably should have. I'm also not a quitter by nature, so
Yep.
I'm gonna try to see something out, till the point of hey, this is very clear that I can't be here. What I did struggle with a bit though is um, the disconnect between who we say we want to be as a bank and what the
Our actions
actions that
show.
we're
Yep.
taking are. Yeah,
Yep.
and that was a piece that I internally struggled with for years before landing on the decision that I needed to move on.
Yeah. The last bank I worked at was called Farmers State Bank.
Hmm.
Farmer was in there as a nice to have saying, but the reality was we were concerned in making decisions based on what was best for the bank and the shareholders of that institution. That's it.
That's right. And,
Yeah.
and it was no different for us in terms of at the end of the day, the cooperative results and what they can pay for a dividend is what is driving the decision making, right or
Yep.
wrong,
Yep.
not what is in the best interest of this customer and individual family in front of me.
So I always laugh at the dividends, right? Because Farm Credit, as they should, uses it as a marketing asset there. And you're driving down I-70 in Kansas. I kid you not. There's four different billboards between here and Colorado that highlight that Farm Credit last year paid record dividends to farmers and ranchers. And I'm like, well, for people that don't understand marketing, what's funny about this is in order to pay record dividends, they also had to charge record interest rates as well. And so,
Bingo.
but most farmers are like, man, I need to go work. It's like, no, look at the reverse side of this as well. And let's talk about some of those issues from that point of things there.
And I think also with the dividend, the value proposition to a larger operation
Mm.
is a lot more significant, right? So if
Yes.
you're making
Yes.
management decisions centered around, cooperative results and dividends, it really is not catering to the average ag producer. It's catering to the larger scale folks, right?
Yes.
I
That to
had
where,
customers that if I had said to them, hey, you can give us your dividend back and get more high touch service, some of the smaller customers would have done that in a heartbeat. They would have
oh,
gone,
really?
great, take your
Yeah.
take your 2 grand in dividends back if you can give me higher touch service and
Yeah.
be more of a partner for me.
Hmm. Yeah. And the other thing too, like this goes back to, them using this as a marketable asset, which I get why they're doing it. But at the end of the day, some of the customers that I've worked with over the years, Mike, some of them have really great bankers, right? And I've talked to them about, you need to worry about the equity in your balance sheet, but also the equity or the capital in your relationship. Where relationship capital is a term I actually use there, right? And some of them had really great bankers, and they're looking at changing and moving from one bank to another to save 1% on their operating line of credit for most of them. That's not very many dollars there to make a drastic change, have to go through the entire process there of, getting all your collateral moved over and changing UCCs and all this type of crap there. It's not significant enough for a lot of the operations. Whereas like the bigger, 10, 15, $20 million operations there that Farm Credit probably has, that patronage or that dividend is a huge thing for them. And it results in real dollars there, which would justify a move like that.
Yeah, I always look at those record dividends and go, but at what expense from an
Yeah.
operational output standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Are the farmers you're serving better off because of that record dividend?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know. And those are some of the just the dangers that we run into. Now, what moving over to Legacy Farmer, you joined the team with us here when?
I joined September 15th.
September 15th. Okay, great. So been here a few months now.
Yeah.
And looking at this, what caused you to take the jump? Right? 17 years
So
farm credit and everything there. Yeah.
so there was a gap between when I left Farm Credit and when I say found Legacy Farmer. So the decision to leave Farm Credit, I looked at long and hard and really thought about what do I want to spend the back half of my career doing. What I found was I was not in a position to be effective as a leader. I have no problem, ladling out the punch, so to speak, but I
Mhm.
got to have full buy-in to how it's being mixed. And I felt there was a disconnect between what we were making for decisions as a company and what was the best interest of our employees and most importantly, our customers. So
Yeah.
I had an opportunity to explore a self-employment opportunity with actually a local guy that I know. We explored that. I think there were some good revenue opportunities there, but as I explored, hey, what is that going to mean day to day, hour to hour for me in terms of work? It was
Yeah.
not the right fit. So was glad I had a lot of small business experience to be able to see that. At that point, my eyes were open to hey, I've spent a lot of time not being available as a mentor to my kids, as a dad,
Mhm.
as a partner to my spouse, right? I don't think I did anything wrong, but really opened my eyes to how important that was to me. So I really reevaluated what do I want to do long term? What are the things that are important to me? And what I kept coming back to was I care a lot about people and I want to do something where I'm helping people. And this summer I was thinking all over the map in terms of what that could mean career wise. But I was also really missing working with farmers directly. So I was actually headed on a camping trip with my family this summer. One of my colleagues from my farm credit days was like, "Hey, have you ever heard of Legacy Farmer before?" I had not at that point because I had buried my head in the sand from all things ag for a little while. And as I explored Legacy Farmer, I said, "This seems to check all the boxes on both sides of things."
Yeah.
And I really feel blessed that I found you guys because it couldn't align better with what I was looking for, even if I couldn't have defined what that was.
Well, and the thing is though too is like I feel very blessed that all of you guys have jumped on board here because honestly, Mike, same as you, for so long I felt like I was on an island. I was on an island, and I was the only one that saw the industry this way. You know what I mean? And
Square
like,
peg, round hole. I felt like that
and
so much.
and now as we're starting to build and grow the team, and we get more people applying to be a business coach with us and things like that, it's like shoot, my eyes are really being opened here to how we can one, really help out a lot of people in the industry, right? First and foremost, but two, really get a lot of great people that are stuck inside the bars of the bank. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like trapped inside the bars of the bank that look at the industry the way that we do, see the problems. And the thing is all those types of people that look at it the way we do, they're going to be A players that we want on the team that are really going to step in and help because they're here for the right reasons, which is why, like, once we started expanding and growing, found Lance first. And then obviously, he's done a great job bringing all of you guys onto the team there as well. Just really opened my eyes to where, okay, this long-term goal or this vision of how I wanted to impact the industry, like I can see it happening now.
Yep. And the thing that's really refreshing for me is this was a lot of the things that the bank would say, "Hey, we think customers should be doing this, right?
Yeah.
These are the things that make you a good loan customer for the bank." But a lot of the customers looked at it as, "Hey, this is price of admission for a loan, right? Why do I
Yep.
complete a balance sheet? I complete a balance sheet so I can get my operating line renewed." Do you
Yep.
look at it? Yeah, it's interesting, but I hand it to the banker and then I do it again next year
Yep.
versus I'm doing this as a tool to help me manage my business. And that's the piece that I really like is the folks that we're working with are like, I want to develop these skills and these tools to manage my business, not just to satisfy my bank.
Yeah, and so Farm Credit down in Texas, I can't remember exactly. It was Capital Farm Credit, the one that Lance was at. We met with some of their team there, and they had built out a similar program, and invested all the capital and everything into that. And they launched the program, hired people for it, and shut it down after 2 years. Why do you think they shut it down?
My suspicion would be that they couldn't figure out how to make it work from an operational standpoint and to make sure that folks were feeling that they were getting the value for the cost.
And it all comes down to, I don't even think it was an additional cost to their customers. I think they were doing it
Interesting.
to try to help them, again, doing all the things that we're doing there. But that's why I told the person that we were talking with, I was like, the difference is we're running marketing and advertising, and we're getting people that are choosing to do this. They want to
Bingo.
do this. They see the gap and everything there. If we made this for free, then there's no friction, right? There's no challenge. There's nothing they have to decide on. There's no advancement or growth there for that customer. I said, so the difference is that our people are coming here because they're choosing to grow, not coming here because of some free resource that the bank is trying to push onto their customers now. And also, too, they look at it as an additional thing now that they have to do for their bank, no matter how much the bank tries to change that perspective from the customer there, or that perception. They're going to look at it as an additional thing to get their loans approved and that type of stuff there, versus the customers that we're coming in with. They want to grow. They notice the gap. They're sick of being where they're at. They want to get to where they want to go, and they see Legacy Farmer as the pathway to get them there.
Yeah, and the thing that I've really enjoyed is we have the capacity to actually coach them
Mhm.
rather than just try to tell them a few facts and then move on to the next one, right? And that's where I
Yep.
go to that comment about managing it as a commodity. It's like, okay, well, how much throughput can we get per employee, and how
Yep.
do we get that cost per hundred of loan volume down? And also have, better results year over year. And, to me, that can align, but often doesn't align with providing great service and value to your customers.
And a perfect example, though, too, of that viewpoint of looking at your customers as a commodity is, so. For example, I had one customer based in Iowa, super successful, cash flow positive every single year, even in the down years. Marketed his crop really well, had crop insurance in place, like just had a full system and everything. Was really had his shit together, I guess, to be honest. And he was working the farm credit, and his loan officer contacted him and said they had some concerns over his operation because his average, cost per acre wasn't similar to what their averages were for all the other customers. And he reached out to me and said, well, how accurate is this? Like, should I be concerned about this? I was like, no, absolutely not. No one operation is the same. The fact that they're trying to throw you into a basket of all their operations, that is not the same way to look at it. Everybody is dealing with different variables, especially if it's spanning across like a large geographical area where the environmental impacts and variables you're dealing with there are changing across the board. I was like, but this is the problem that we're seeing inside of ag banking is we're trying to put everybody into this one box when each individual operation needs to be looked at, and it's a different strategy for each operation, period.
And I think, what we've seen, it's interesting. What we've seen over time is we've gone from diversified farm operations to singular focused farm operations,
Yep.
right? And then it's almost as though if you're diversified, they're trying to fit you into an underwriting bucket that you don't
Yep.
really fit into. And I go, well, what is an entrepreneur supposed to be doing? They're supposed to be looking at business opportunities, right? Seizing those business opportunities in the
Yep.
marketplace and then making adjustments when the business opportunities aren't there. I had a successful dairy farm, and he shared with me that his grandfather once said to him, "If the cows aren't making money, the first thing you need to do is sell the cows." And that was really unique compared to a lot of other operators who felt like it was their legacy or their obligation to continue the operation the same way it was that they were born into.
Yeah.
And
And
it stuck with me for years is what wisdom he shared with you, which is it's about this business and the agricultural operation, not what specific commodity we're in or what we're producing.
And the thing is, I was thinking about this morning on my run. Um, People's inability or unwillingness to change in
Yeah.
an environment and a world that demands change. And every day, a small part of our life changes, whether we want it to or not. But it's crazy how some people, they're so bought into this identity and this story that things have to be done a certain way there, that whenever change pops up in their life, they want to run as far and as fast away from it as they possibly can there. And then 5 years down the road, they wonder why neighbor down the road who adopts change, who welcomes it and wants it, is has built an operation that's 2, 3 times the size of theirs and is more
Right.
successful and profitable.
Right. And it wasn't because they continued doing everything that had been done before the way it had been
Yeah.
done before.
It wasn't even because they did anything that was magical. It's just because they saw change coming. They chose to adapt and evolve, and now they're reaping the reward from it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's one of those mindsets there. My granddad was very much the same way. I 100% believe that is why our family operation went under, because it was early 2000s. Local markets became global markets with worldwide trading, right? And how fast things were happening. Price of cattle, my dad used to tell me back in the 70s, it wouldn't change more than 3 to 5 cents a month. And now we have 50 cent to dollar cent, to $1 swings per hour, every couple hours or whatever that is, back then. And my granddad, though, he didn't understand the pool they do swimming in, and he had no marketing game plan. He fed all of his own cattle on his own $6 million operating line credit. It was 14,000 head, which would be like a 20 to $25 million operating line today, probably, maybe even more than that. And ultimately, yeah, he's treating the business like he did back in the 60s and 70s, pretending that the volatility isn't there when it's obviously there, and ultimately had to pay the biggest price for it.
Yeah, kind of the if I build it, they will come
Yeah.
mentality
Mhm.
with some of those commodities. Yeah, it's only for a window of time.
Yep. Yep. And I think that's, I share that too for anybody listening as well, because one of our core values inside of Legacy Farmer is adapt and evolve, right? We're constantly looking for changing and evolving the product and the service and things that we're building here because the industry demands it. But the world also demands it as well. And the longer that we try to fight that change, the more we're going to struggle and honestly lesser value than that we're going to be able to give to our customers as well.
And I think as humans, right, it's normal. I even find myself, right, if we have something that changes, my initial reaction is a little bit like resistant to it, right?
Mhm.
And what I have to do is I have to use what's going on between my ears
Yep.
to reframe that and make sure that I'm not falling into that trap of resisting change when the change is probably for the best.
Yeah.
If I can just kind of get over my own discomfort with things being different.
And the thing is, though, too, is I talked at a event last week in Texas, and one thing I covered with the audience was this concept around your divine timeline. But looking back at the events that took place in your life, where you either chose to change or God forced you to change when you didn't want to and you were scared to, looking back at those and literally mapping out the timeline, right, of things that happened, the sequence that they happened, and understanding that every time that, yeah, maybe we didn't want to change, but we were forced to, it always worked out. And it was
Mhm.
always for the better. And it always ended up way better than what we ever thought it was going to be when we were in the middle of it. And I think the importance of doing that, though, too, is you get enough of these events, right? These divine moments in life where God steps in, either again, you choose to change or he forces you to change. You start looking back over that timeline and you're like, okay, well, even if I'm facing a new change right now, I have literally years or 2 decades of proof here that every time I faced this before, everything's worked out.
And sometimes the biggest resistance to change is our own ego or
Mhm.
self-perception on it,
Oh, yeah.
right? Instead of trusting that, yeah, this is probably for the good and happening for a reason.
Yeah, I look back, my granddad too, 100% was that way. But even with Legacy Farmer Mike, I got into 2022 and 2023. I could have stayed where I was at. It could have been me and Joni running this company. I already had the software, I'd already put money into the software, good enough where I could continue working with customers and things like that. But I was also stuck at a crossroads where, okay, do I sit here and continue to be comfortable in this, or do I try to bring on investors? Do I try to scale this thing and impact the industry at the biggest level that I can, that I honestly saw in the beginning of starting Legacy Farmer? And so even the past 2 years for me, has it been extremely uncomfortable? Absolutely. But there's also been growth in that. There's also been trust. There's also been learning. There's also been growing. If you're not uncomfortable, then you're not growing, period. Like I'm a firm believer in that.
Well, and it gives us a purpose, right? And what I've
Yeah,
observed with folks is when they lose that purpose, their kind of drive for things also starts to start.
absolutely. Yeah, because what was once new becomes normal. And if you
That's
stay in
right.
normal too long, that purpose just starts to get pretty dried out a little
I
bit.
had a senior manager at Farm Credit. I asked him how he was one day, and he's like, "I'm all right. It's like just changing the laundry,
Yep.
wash, rinse, repeat." And it stuck with me like that's
Yeah.
not how I
No.
want to be looking at life. That's you're treading water, you're stagnant. So
Well, and I did a podcast. This was back in 2019 or so. And the title of the podcast was called The Fire Burns Out. And the reason I chose that was because, we all have these people that we know were just like, athletic and just like studs in high school, right? And they like winning events and state championships and all this type of stuff. And then you look at their life 20 years later, they're fat, they're out of shape, they have zero purpose, zero drive, and every day is literally just lived on repeat, right? No
yep.
different than the day before. We're just literally robots here going through life. And the concept that I used there was like over time, if you're not making changes or following what that purpose is and what you feel God is calling you to do, over time, that fire within you starts to burn out. And that's why you see these massively successful athletic people in high school 20 years later look absolutely destroyed, burned out. And even though they're only in their 40s, you would bet they're in their late 50s or going into their 60s because their body just looks so burned up or so torn down there. And that's the people that they choose the comfortable lifestyle, and because of that, their fire and their drive all burns out.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So
And I'm really happy you made that decision to not just keep it you and Joni, because I think you guys are impacting a whole lot more people by
and
making that decision to expand.
absolutely. And so see, that's why I appreciate you saying that, because even you coming onto the team here and having these discussions like I do with all of you guys, it just reaffirms that, hey, this is why we're doing this, right? Because not only do we get to impact more farmers and ranchers and families across the US, but we get to impact the people on our team as well and give people an opportunity that maybe they're looking for, but traditional mindsets or training from high school and college that you got to get a good job, like, this is that pathway to kind of break out of that cage there and start living a life that you want to. Yep.
Yeah, it's the days of me getting over focused on the next career move, the next promotion, those sort of things
Yeah.
are out the window. What matters to me each day is, am I positively impacting, the people that I encounter, right? It's kind of
And
like, when you go out in nature, you want to leave it the same or
mhm,
a little bit better than you found it. I feel the same way about interacting with people, and I wish more people would do that. But like when you interact with another human, like leave them a little bit better off
mhm,
than how you found them,
yep.
or at least be net neutral. Don't be somebody that leaves them in a negative position.
Yeah. And sometimes you got to make changes or choices there that may be risky, but that's what's going to line you up to be able to positively impact others as well. The other thing I'll talk about here too, before we jump into some of your customers that you've worked with here at Legacy Farmer too, is just from an efficiency standpoint and value standpoint. I know that we're able to do this a lot better, even though our entire team's remote and most of our relationships with obviously with our customers are done via Zoom calls and stuff like that. The structure of those Zoom calls, though, is a lot more timely and efficient than it is working with people inside the office or inside the bank. You know what I mean?
100%. So
Yes.
part of my last role at Farm Credit, I was overseeing a team that also had some business consultants on it. And the way they approached that was billable hours, right? So what I ended up finding was there was a disconnect between the value provided, and then they get a bill and then they're trying to dissect the bill.
Yeah.
And that, really was creating a conflict with those customers.
Yep.
So as I've looked at, okay, how do we approach this from the legacy farmer model? One of the things that I struggled with was we wanted to do some remote meetings at Farm Credit, but you try to have both feet in both pools, and
Yeah.
it's very hard to do. The thing that I
Yep.
like is we're initiating these relationships going, okay, this is going to be a remote coaching relationship. So I
Yep.
haven't found that there's been any pushback on that at all because that's part of the deal initially.
Zero. Yeah. And people
But
actually appreciate it more because, again, the meeting is more structured. We have an hour. This is exactly what we're going to cover. And then we move on and they get to go about their day. Don't have to drive back home, if they live 30 miles in the country, any of that type of crap.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So,
And, I'm able to engage with 4 or 5 customers in a day, provide value, and not feel
yep.
like I've spent a whole bunch of time behind the windshield not delivering value.
Yep. But I mean, just, talking about all the automations and AI and stuff, having meeting recaps, having to dos, having all this information that normally wouldn't get working in the office or going to a face to face meeting there readily available as well, right? Just increases the value and everything across the board.
The term I keep coming back to, and I've had some colleagues say, "Hey, how's it going for you?" That sort of thing. And the term I keep coming back to is it's really refreshing, right? And
Yep.
the AI meeting notes, right? I'm not somebody that takes great notes, but I
Yep.
feel like I have a lot of great conversations, and that's a piece I always struggled with. So to me, to have AI take the notes for me during the meeting and then have really meaningful notes afterwards means that I can focus on the
Yep.
humans on the other side and not be going, well, I need to make sure I capture all of this. And that was a huge inefficiency in terms of how Farm Credit does things.
Yep. So now jumping back right quick to lender liability. One of the things I hated about the bank was that we were unable, because of that liability, to share what was working and not working inside of other operations as well. Right. Have you noticed how you're not handcuffed with that here? And has that been valuable for you to be able to, with the customers that you have worked with coming in here, being able to share or bring up stories or examples from other customers that you're working with based on facts, not just theory of what's working and not working there in order to help the people that you're working with on that meeting?
Yeah, 100%. I think, part of me is I always like to be respectful of people's privacy,
Hmm.
right? But I also realized I was conditioned in the farm credit world to be to the ultra extreme of
Yes.
confidentiality, which I think
Yep.
was a good thing. I think customers appreciated that. But what they don't appreciate is when they know that you know more insights than you'll share with them, and they
Yep.
feel like, hey, you're keeping facts behind the curtain that you could share with me. And it's not tell me what my neighbor's doing, but it's more what are you seeing successful farms do?
Yep.
So the thing that I was challenged by is you can say, here's what people are doing generally, but you can't say this is what you should do with your business, even
Well,
if you know in your head and they're
yes.
asking you for that feedback.
And that's the downfall, though, too, of everybody going to the same local bank. Absolutely, the bank has to have those standards in place there because Mike doesn't want his neighbor, who he has to see 8 times a day, knowing exactly what's going on. Versus with us, if we're sharing examples, it's from somebody several states away. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Right.
And so, and
Yep.
it, again, yeah, protecting names and that type of stuff, but being able to share numbers or whatever that is there, again, not from your neighbor next door or a competitor down the road or anything like that, literally from states away. And I think the industry needed that in a big way. And that's where even in the early days of Legacy Farm, where people would always say the community piece was one of the most valuable pieces for them because that knowledge of learning what's working, what's not working, more importantly, learning what not to do versus learning what to do was absolute gold for them. And I didn't see it in the early days there, but it's like, shit, yeah, we don't have this in the industry.
No, and what I find is right when you ask your neighbor for feedback, unless you've got a really strong relationship, you get one of two
Yeah.
things. Either you get
You're,
a, yeah, it's all good, or more often you get the most doom and gloom version of their
yes.
reality, right? So it's either going to say, yeah, everybody, life sucks for everybody, or, well, at least I'm not as bad as them, but you aren't getting actual meaningful feedback in terms of what they're seeing in their
And
operations.
I always told customers, I was like, I called that secondary incentives.
Hmm.
Right. So whenever you're having these conversations with people, yeah, their primary incentive when you're asking for direct help is for them to help you. But you wonder, and you can't help but wonder if they're your neighbor and honestly, in some ways, a competitor, are there secondary incentives behind the primary to where it's adjusting what they're actually telling you to actually be obviously more incentivizing for those secondary ones down the road for them. You know what I mean?
Even if they aren't doing it consciously, I
Mhm.
think that that's just the nature of how people are
Yep.
wired, right?
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Well, so let's talk about some of the customers here that you've worked with coming in, because over the past 2 to 3 months, how many customers have you onboarded, and are you working with right now?
Yeah, so I've got about 10 that I'm working on the onboarding process with.
Okay.
And then I've really appreciated that I've got to jump in with some, just directly as a coach.
Yep.
Once I shown that I was,
Yep.
going to be able to deliver value. I've got about 12, I think, now that I'm working with directly as the coach. And I've enjoyed that each one has brought, kind of a unique nature of their operation or structure or family dynamic to the table.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer that, it all comes back to the people, the success side, whether that be, the people that we're working with externally or how we're handling our own family dynamics. And that's the piece that I've really enjoyed getting to know some of these customers and what they're doing right with the people in their operation and around their
Mhm.
operation and where they may need to sharpen the pencil a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think I've heard you say this a couple times here, just around how I would probably consider you more of like a people first coach, right? And making sure we're focusing on taking care of the customer and things like that. Going into 2026, though, what are some of the things that you're focusing on very heavily with the customer you had up to this point and their game plan and getting their strategy put together for 2026 and just market environment and thing like that we're dealing with?
So first thing to me is, do they understand their balance sheet and what the value in understanding their balance sheet is, right?
Hmm.
And seeing, okay, especially as you look at current assets and current liabilities, what is the sequence that goes through that top end of your balance sheet throughout your operating cycle? The next piece to me is the cash flow piece. I've spent a lot of time working with clients that utilize QuickBooks.
Hmm.
To me, that is financial accounting. You're doing that to be able to do tax reporting at the end of the year. and it doesn't provide a lot of insight in terms of, the ins and outs of your operation.
Yep.
So what I really like that we're doing is we're focused on the cash flow, and more importantly, that allows us to see, okay, what is our break-even cash flow? What is our break-even price? What are our break-even yields, to understand really what our numbers are, and not just have it be if I build it, it will come, and I hope everything comes out in the wash at the end of the year.
Yeah.
To me, with what we're seeing in commodity markets and margin slipping, it becomes even more important for folks to understand what are those margins, where am I making money, where am I losing money, and do I have a plan to take more control over the income side of things in my operation, versus just, letting the market shake out where it is. So whether
Yeah.
that be, selling things direct to consumer and not just into commodity markets, whether that be figuring out, work with a customer that, does organic grains and those sort of things, and they're finding there's a whole niche market for homesteaders and everything. So really thinking about, okay, how can I take more control or change the dynamics of what the income side of my cash flow looks like?
Yeah.
So those are the two biggest things to me. The other thing that I look at always is what is the working capital position, and what does their debt structure look like? Because you can have somebody with a very short overall debt term, that the cash flow looks really tight on, but it's a
Yep.
structure of how that debt's structured,
Yes.
versus somebody that can have great cash flow, but they've turned everything out and aren't gaining that equity each year that they really should be.
Yeah. Those customers are they're counting on appreciation of assets more than actual equity built into the assets through payments. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's where we get into problems there. That one customer that you were talking about there that found out there's an entire kind of direct consumer market for the grains there, and things like that. Do you think that person would have ever thought about that or come across that information if they wouldn't have been in that conversation with you?
I think they landed on it on their own,
Okay.
just evolving. But what I don't think that they really thought about is, why do these consumers want my product? I think they looked at it and went, oh, great, here's a niche where I can get a little bit better margin, but hadn't really thought about how are my customers thinking about this? And I,
Yeah.
I use the example of, a farmer going to a farmer's market and seeing how much they sell a dozen eggs for, and just being appalled that people would pay that
Yeah.
price for eggs, but they aren't thinking about, how does my customer think about the value of my
Mhm.
product? They think about, how do I think about it? So,
Yeah.
we're really encouraging that customer to think, how is their customer thinking? And I think now their eyes are open to, wow, this is a huge opportunity for my business, not just the little sliver that we get some better margins on is probably a pain in the
Yeah.
neck to deal with.
Mhm. Yeah. And that perspective is, all that we're trying to help customers achieve and everything. That's not something that just happens overnight. Even for me, it was built over years of struggling. And I would say from 2016 when I left the bank to 2019 before I launched Legacy Farmer, I was adopting that new frame on how people looked at things, how to market, and that type of stuff there as well. Because again, I had the very old school mentality when I left the bank, where if I build it, they will come. Well, they did not come, and it does not work that way. And you actually have to speak a message and get your voice out there and put yourself out there and understand marketing psychology and strategic seduction is what the framework was that I implemented at that time. Yeah, you have to build all these skill sets here, but once you start to build those skill sets, even with these customers, if they adopt that new mindset, it opens up this whole new trajectory for their farm operation and for their future because of that one subtle change or one conversation with you to really help them dive into what does this actually mean and how are the customers looking at it.
Well, and I think it also refreshes what their purpose is, right?
Yeah.
Now they're excited about, hey, there's a new thing that I'm looking at with my business, not just that same, hey, we're going through the motions and trying to do a little bit better than we did last year.
Yeah, but yeah, just essentially surviving, right? Spinning the wheel year to year, surviving, hoping we can do it again next year, right? But with no real strategy or growth plan in place. Have there been certain customers there to where once they got their balance sheet and cash flow put together, that you just noticed this weight lifted off their shoulders as
Oh,
well?
absolutely. Meeting with a customer this morning, before we hopped on the call together, and they, historically the one who's handled the books has been the one that is the point of contact for bank calls and all that sort of thing. But the person operating the farm is the other spouse. So, really now the person operating the farm feels more empowered to be able to have those conversations and
Yeah.
understand the numbers. And the spouse that's doing the books wants nothing more than their spouse to be, stepping up to the plate, for lack of a
Yes.
better term, on some of those things. The other piece is, the cash flow can oftentimes feel really tight, but that may not be that there's a core profitability issue. It could again be, hey, what have we funded for capital expenditures that we tried
Yep.
to do out of cash flow? And this cash flow pinch isn't that we have an underlying sustainability issue with our finances. It's we tried to bite off a whole lot and just fund it through operations that we
Yeah.
couldn't do. So sometimes when they see that and they go, well, we're not in as bad of a position as it feels like we are. We just need to make some changes to how this is set up.
And I feel like it's this dance between, yes, you want cash flow positive, statements and everything put together there as well. Like that's the ideal picture. But even with some of my customers over the years, even if they were showing a little bit, like say it was a negative 100,000 or negative 150,000 on their projected cash flow for the year, they built 350,000 in equity from their payments on real estate and everything. I was like, guys, so there's two numbers that we're focusing on. Yes, we're looking at that overall cash flow profit or loss there for the year. But the bigger thing is here is that earned net worth on your balance sheet. Are we actually moving forward? Because to me, that's the bigger driver of where the operation is going and making sure that yes, we want to, if we can have the best of both worlds, yes, let's have the best of both worlds. Obviously, that's what we're shooting for in Legacy Farmer. But to your point, it's not always as bad as, some people think it is.
Right, right. And I also think, for a lot of folks, they look at, okay, what does that profit and loss statement tell me at the end of the year instead of,
Yeah.
hey, what did my balance sheet change tell me at the end of the
Yep.
year? Did we
Yep.
make progress or not?
Yep. Absolutely. And making progress off of earned net worth, not just appreciated net worth, and going in and updating your land
Got it.
values like some of these people like to do. I'm like, oh God, guys, that's a terrible habit to be building. You are going to set yourself up for massive failure. But even in those situations, I hit the bankers just as hard there because the bankers that finance off that appreciation every year, I'm like, oh, it's just not a good situation across the board there. Uh,
Nope, nope, not at all.
so, well, working with your customers now, what are some of the key things that you've noticed you get to do with them that you would have never gotten to do inside of Farm Credit?
Well, I can give real advice, right?
Okay.
I can look at the numbers and go, here's what you need to do.
Yep.
I can hold them a bit more accountable, right? It
Yep.
comes down to their personalities and you got to understand how to coach different people. But I can, provide real feedback and not feel like, hey, I have this lender liability, or how is the bank or my manager at the bank going to
Yep.
feel about how I framed this feedback?
Yeah.
Much more concern on impact on the bank, and understandably so, versus focus solely on what does this business and this family operating this business, need to do and should be focused on.
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
and and some of it is also giving them some encouragement that,
Mm.
hey, here's what I see from my experience, and you guys are doing a good job in these areas, and here are the areas that you need to focus on more. But being able to actually give real advice and shoot straight with people.
Yeah.
I struggled for a long time with not being able to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And it ate away at me on running meetings with customers and having essentially a list of, what my boss told me I could say and couldn't say. Like I just struggled with it. Is like I was working with my parents right there. I couldn't do it. So,
Right.
all right. Well, last question for you, and then we'll wrap up this interview here. With legacy being in the company's name and everything, obviously that's a huge thing that we're pushing for here and trying to help people build for the future generations that follow. What I've learned over the years, though, is that a lot of people define legacy in different ways there. So, final question for you is: what does legacy mean to you, and how do you define it?
So on an individual level, I'd probably define it a little bit differently, but to me, it's going to sound really corny, but
Mhm.
a legacy is being in a better place today than you were yesterday,
Mhm.
and continuing on that. So,
Yeah.
that can be both the legacy of your family, but I think that's also who you are as an individual and the impact that you have on others. And to
Yeah.
me, that's the legacy is, okay, how am I impacting those that are around me? And I think for a lot of producers, that's okay, how do I ensure that the opportunity that's provided to the next generation is as good, if not way better than the opportunity that was provided to me?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I don't think it was corny at all. I think it was a great definition and very simple too. So, all right, Mike. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to have the call with me today, and I'm even more excited and appreciative of you taking the jump from Farm Credit to join us at Legacy Farmer.
I'm blessed to be here and appreciate being with you today, Jace. Have
Yeah.
a good one.
All right, thanks, man.